Hey, what's up guys, it's KXF and welcome back to another video. So today we're going to be checking out once again another mechanical keyboard, and this time it's the Corsair Strafe RGB MK.2. And without a doubt, let's go ahead and jump right in. The Corsair Strafe RGB MK.2 is the 104 key mechanical gaming keyboard. It's got dedicated multimedia keys, a middle volume scroll wheel, as well as 3 buttons that toggle between profiles, brightness, and gaming mode respectively. It's got per key RGB illumination to display the entire color spectrum of 16.8 million colors, and each key on the keyboard can also be individually programmed. What I like about this keyboard is the fact that the design is a mix between a concealed and exposed switch design, which allows there to be a white backplate underneath the keycaps which reflects the RGB lights back to the user, making the RGB lighting much brighter than before and making it easier to clean and replace keycaps as well. There's also a 2-zone RGB illuminated Corsair logo smack in the middle at the top of the keyboard. The Strafe has 8 MB of onboard storage in which you can store up to 3 custom profiles, and there's also a 32-bit ARM Cortex processor built into the keyboard as well. The top plate of the keyboard itself is constructed out of a plastic material, but the area right above the function and multimedia keys has an aircraft-rated anodized brushed aluminum top plate. Despite being constructed mostly out of plastic, the Strafe RGB MK.2 is actually quite heavy in terms of weight. If you mash down on the keys super hard, there's so little to no flex at all. This keyboard features full end key rollover as well as 100% anti-ghosting. There's also a USB 2.0 pass-through port on the back of the board next to the thick and braided cable, but that does mean that it will have to take up 2 USB slots on your motherboard's I/O. Flipping the Strafe over, we've got 4 small rubber pads to prevent the keyboard from sliding around on your desk, as well as 2 feet for height adjustment, which aren't rubberized for some apparent reason. A lot of people actually don't mention this, but there's also a white LED strip on the left and right side of the Strafe, and they can be turned off or kept on based off of your preference. In terms of extras, the Strafe MK.2 does include a plastic little keycap holder as well as 2 sets of contoured and textured gray keycaps, a WASD set for your FPS games, and a QWERDF set for your MOBA games. There's also a plastic detachable wrist rest, but it doesn't really do much for me as my hands are pretty big in size. The stabilizers that the Strafe MK.2 uses are called cherry style stabilizers, making it easy to replace keycaps and whatnot. I'm guessing Corsair has also improved the quality of their stabs, as these ones don't sound rattly and cheap at all. They no longer feel mushy either, but I'll get to that in a second. Another thing the Corsair Strafe features are the Cherry MX Red silent switches, which are basically just red switches, but they have silicone dampening pads, making them much quieter on not only the downstroke but also the upstroke. The MX silent switches have an actuation force of 45 grams, a total travel distance of 3.7 millimeters, and actuate at 1.9 millimeters. The Strafe RGB MK.2 can also come with regular Cherry MX Red switches. They also have a 45 gram actuation force, but they have a total travel of 4 millimeters and actuate at 2 millimeters. So technically speaking, the MX silents are actually a tad bit faster, and they're also much more quiet, hence the name silent. However, these switches feel much mushier than the regular MX Reds due to the dampening pads built into the switch as shown in the image here. Notice how there's a white thing on the slider of the silent switch and how there's none on the regular red switch. Here's a side-by-side comparison. Poorly made cherry style stabilizers will make the larger keys feel mushy, but because of the already existing sort of mushy feeling of the switches themselves, keys such as left shift, right shift, num 0, and the space bar feel pretty much just like any other switch on the keyboard. And because of how quiet these MX silents are, you're also able to use them in office environments as they barely sound any different from a membrane keyboard. So let me give you guys a quick sound test between these Cherry MX Red silent switches and compare them to a typical rubber dome switch keyboard so you guys can hear for yourself. Then obviously we have the software, the one and only Corsair IQ. With this software, you can program and create macro keys, as well as mess with the RGB lighting effects. You're also able to do many other things, such as monitor the components of a rig by going to the tab at the top titled Dashboard. Now let's talk about pricing for the Corsair Strafe RGB MK.2. The version with the Cherry MX Red switches sells for $140, and then the version with the Cherry MX Red Silent switches sells $10 more at $150 due to the extra cost of manufacturing them. I got my Strafe MK.2 at Best Buy for only $100 because it was currently on sale at the moment. Now for some pros and cons. The dedicated multimedia keys and the metal volume scroll wheel are definitely a big pro, as they make it so I can quickly adjust the volume of my headset and pause or skip to the next track while listening to some music. The ability to have onboard storage for 3 custom profiles on the go is also definitely a welcome touch. I also really dig the whole half exposed, half concealed switch design, which like I stated before, makes the beautiful RGB lighting pop out some more. The Cherry MX Red Silent switches are also something that I really like, as you can get the feeling of a mechanical keyboard with about the noise level of a membrane keyboard, so that it can be used in even office environments. So basically you're getting best of both worlds from both the mechanical and membrane keyboards. For the cons, I would really prefer some PPT double shot keycaps to be used instead of this cheap ABS plastic. Even keyboards such as the Ducky 1-2 Mini cost less and has PPT keycaps, so there shouldn't be any excuses for the Corsair Strafe RGB MK.2 to not have them. Next up is the included wrist rest. It really doesn't do much for me at all because of how small the thing itself is, and the hard plastic material that was used to make it isn't exactly a pillow from the heavens. It also latches onto the keyboard via 2 plastic clips, so it's not exactly the most secure method ever. I would also like to point out something that occurs on my particular unit. If I press on the left or right side of the spacebar with a tad bit of force, the opposite side will pop up like this, so obviously the stabilizers will need some more improvement. Anyway, that'll conclude my review for the Corsair Strafe RGB MK.2 with the Cherry MX Red Silent switches. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up to show your support, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and click that notification bell so you'll miss out on any of my future videos. I'm TXF, and I'll see you all next time.